You're listening to Contesting Wrestling. This is Minisode number 2.
Here we're responding to episode 3, which was about referees, where we had referee B. Ross as a special guest referee, as it were.
Oh, nailed it.
I did have to tap out at the end of that episode after one of you put me in a rest hold.
There you go.
Pretty brutal.
Eventually, the ref lifted your hands 3 times. It wasn't the hold. You're just falling asleep because rest holds are boring.
It was not restful.
No,
not restful.
Every wrestling trainer I've ever had says there's no such thing as rest holds. Any boring hold can be made interesting if you just work it properly. And if all you're doing is resting in it, get out of the business.
I will say, in the time since we have recorded the refs episode, I do notice refs more in matches. We recently watched a ladder match, and I noticed there was a whole thing where the ref was like scolding the person using the ladder while also very clearly holding the ladder stable for the. And like,
you're talking about
like
the
Michaels Vinch,
which was not technically a ladder match.
Oh,
though
okay,
there was a ladder match, and there was a ladder involved.
It was a match with a ladder in it.
I still love how he got rid of the ladder and then got the bigger ladder.
We'll get to that.
The only other real note from the episode is, Ben, you sign off the episode by saying, "And I'll see you in your worst nightmares." I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
And since then, I have. There have been multiple times where in my nightmares you appear and slay me, and then I wake up and I have a new scar every time I do that in like the shape of like a word in a dead language that I can somehow understand. It's crazy. Anyway, but I just thought that was a funny thing. I just thought that was a funny little thing that happened last time.
It's language Ben learned in his fancy philosophy college. You have to learn how to write it, but not understand it to get your PhD.
I'm surprised, having known each other for 20 years, it took this long for that to start happening.
The magical seals placed around me at my birth have finally worn away.
So speaking of the supernatural, on this episode we talked about the Undertaker versus Edge match from WrestleMania 24. A couple of things about the Undertaker. When he was first introduced, he was introduced as the $1 Million Man's surprise Survivor Series partner. And so the interesting kind of connection between money and death there, I think, is something to be explored.
All the way back in 1990.
It'd be really funny if he was introduced as the $1 Million Man's Undertaker, and now the person who will deal with the $1 Million Man's remains.
Yeah.
And the very first WWF house show I went to at Madison Square Garden in January of 1993, the Undertaker wrestled the $1 Million Man's sometimes tag team partner, Erwin R. Shyster, a.k.a. IRS, who was a tax man.
This feels anti-Semitic.
No,
Shyster at least.
Shyster is, I guess, a
Maybe
kind of
Shyster. The story behind the IRS character was this was right after the IRS had investigated the WWF really heavily, and they found nothing wrong. And Vince McMahon was like, well, everyone hates the tax man, so let's make fun of the IRS. So instead of having entrance music, he'd just come out with a microphone and be like, everyone here are tax cheats. You don't pay your taxes. It was very effective. And the guy couldn't cut a promo to save his life. That's all he had to say. He was a technical, fucking very good wrestler.
And it just occurred to me that that match was death versus taxes.
I wonder how intentional that was.
I don't know. They never made a big feud out of it. Yeah. So it was just a one-off house show match. So I think missed opportunity. So another thing about The Undertaker, we talked about how he kind of switched to the biker character for a while and he dropped the whole zombie thing and then eventually returned to the zombie thing. Apparently he didn't want to go back to being the ghoulish Undertaker.
Really? They forced him to?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of hard. He's got to wear a bunch of makeup. He's got to walk all slow. He can't just be himself, which is basically what the biker character was.
And also, I mean, I just would imagine, he did that shtick for like 20 years when he switched over to the biker character, like
about 10 before he switched.
And he kept 10. And he had to keep kayfabe really hard that whole time because that was still in those days. So yeah,
I'm sure that's totally exhausting, and that is a shame that we've talked before about the idea that where is the line between the Booker's character and what or with the promotions character and like kind of what they're telling you to do, and the character that the wrestler sort of comes up with on their own and nurtures and stuff like that. And it seems, like I could easily imagine you do something for 10 years, even if it's an amazing character, getting to a point where in order for me to continue wrestling and to really put myself into it, I kind of need to change it up and I need to do this other thing for a while. And also just, I'm sure being able to talk would have been cool. Right?
Well, he always talked.
Really? Does he talk as the
Oh,
Undertaker?
he tells you to rest in peace.
Oh, okay.
But he gives like whole promos in that gravelly voice. But that might have been hard to maintain as well.
But as the biker, did he just talk like a more normal guy? Kind of
As the biker, it would be like, Undertaker, what do you think about your opponent's chance? And he'd just be like, I'm the dead man, and I'm going to take him out. And
This
like,
is
it
my
was cool
yard.
too, yeah. The later Undertaker became somewhat of a hybrid between the characters, which was fine. Well, one of the big things about the Undertaker is he always updated his character every couple of years to stay a little relevant. If he had stayed exactly the same, would have gotten old really fast. Just being an undead zombie wizard or whatever.
So in the episode, I had mentioned that Limp Bizkit was once hailed as the WWE's favorite band in the entire world.
Oh, yeah.
At the time when they were doing Undertaker's theme music. And I thought it was interesting. Right now, Slipknot it does the theme for NXT. And they've been doing a lot of stuff with Corey Taylor. So I'd say like Slipknot is NXT's favorite band in the entire world right now. And there's an analogy there, I think, between NXT and WWE and Slipknot and Limp Bizkit, where Slipknot, like NXT to WWE, Slipknot is like just as commercial as Limp Bizkit, but, more extreme in some ways, and like can actually kind of play their instruments a little bit better.
They're a little less accessible.
They have more of a shtick, more of a mythos,
Yeah.
I suppose.
So yeah, anyway, I thought there was something there.
And I will say
There definitely is.
everybody in Slipknot seems to be somebody who's very committed to being a musician, as opposed to apparently Limp Bizkit was just the vehicle for Fred Durst to eventually become a filmmaker, because
What's that?
a filmmaker.
I know what a filmmaker.
Oh, okay,
what
the
is
The guy that makes movies, Ben?
what is the film that he is making?
Oh, he's made like 4 movies so far. One just came out. I can't remember anything about it. But absolutely look this up. He is a director who has directed. People have given him millions of dollars and been like, "Yes, make a movie, please."
Right.
And it's and I'm sure they're terrible. They're always reviewed terribly. Fred Durst is a terrible person.
Wes Borland's kind of cool though.
Yeah, but I mean, Limp Bizkit had a solid rhythm section. Like, Wes Borland had some cool. He made that album, that solo album, that was like, what if Ween was less good?
Yeah.
But I appreciated him trying.
Big dumb face. That was.
I went to that tour. It was, it was interesting. It was definitely him just expressing what was inside of him. I can't fault him for that.
And
Ween is coming to town.
I know. I saw.
And I will say, for all you bond with music in a particular way when you're a teenager that you never really do again. And it kind of goes both ways, where both the bands that I loved as a teenager, the music I loved as a teenager, still stays with me even when I intellectually know that it's bad, because I just connected with it so hard at the time. And also some of the only music I truly hate, I truly despise and think very poorly of, is a lot of the stuff that I hated when I was a teenager, when I was in high school. And that was nu metal. I was very anti nu metal at the time. It was over the years, I've softened on it. I still don't care for it. I have to say, I don't like Slipknot. I don't hate them with the passion that I used to, because it's dumb to hate bands when you're in your 30s. But I guess I respect the fact that they stuck around and they kept doing their thing, and people still really like them, and they're you've referred to they're elder statesmen of metal now. As ridiculous as that seems, they've been around for 20 plus years. So I guess good for them that they have a really weird shtick that they have stuck with this whole time.
I mean, if you're a fan of metal, they're the kind of band that kids will get into and then listen to the other stuff. Whatever you think of them one way or another, you need gateway bands. They're just extreme enough that if you're 13 and listen to them, you think, man, this is going to piss people off.
It was like the first double bass that a lot of people had heard.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
the first like screaming vocals a lot of people heard.
So moving on to Edge, we talked about
Yeah.
in the episode how Edge had to retire due to a neck injury. The rumor is that he may be returning now.
Mm-hmm.
He showed up at SummerSlam, was it?
Well, he showed up on Raw and delivered a spear.
No, I thought it was at SummerSlam.
I don't know what was. Oh, was it? I may have.
It was
been
on
in
the pre-show, I
bathroom or
think, of
something.
SummerSlam.
Oh yeah, no, it was on the pre-show. I believe I was in the bathroom. He did it to Elias.
Looked great. Looks like he's, in shape. He might be healthy, more or less,
Yeah.
and might be returning.
That's up to him if he wants to do it again. Apparently, he's been cleared, but that doesn't necessarily mean he wants to jump right back in. He had a long and satisfying career. Now his wife Beth Phoenix, she's on the commentary team on NXT. He has small children. He may just want to stay at home, but that's once again entirely up to him.
I think the show he was on got canceled. I could be wrong. It might have something to do with it.
Oh, what was it again? Haven?
Haven, yeah, which is a show I've not watched, but I've heard is good.
Yeah.
And Evan, you had mentioned, that you liked Edge a lot. You thought his
I did.
Facial expressions were really good, and his acting and so forth. And actually, thinking back on it, I've mentioned that I didn't watch a lot of wrestling for a couple of years in the late '90s. Edge really had quite a bit to do with me getting back into wrestling. I was aware of him even during the time that I wasn't really watching a lot, and immediately liked him. I thought he seemed cool. And then he and his tag team partner Christian, they did this sort of vampire gimmick for a while, the Brood, that I thought was kind of cool. And then they and this other tag team, the Hardy Boys, had a series of matches that was really exciting. Some of the best in-ring wrestling action that had happened in a long time in WWF at the time, which eventually escalated to the famed original TLC, Tables, Ladders, and Chairs matches, which we should totally watch at some point.
I feel like back in the day of when we tried to show you wrestling, Evan, one of the few things you thought was really cool was TLC 2 at WrestleMania 17. I don't know if you'd remember any of it if we showed it to you, but I'm confident you'd think it was cool if we showed it to you now.
It does sound. I do feel
Yeah.
like I remember watching. A few things with the Hardys with you guys back in the day, and
Yeah.
I have an image of some ladders in there that probably that all tracks. That all tracks what you're saying.
Likely.
And he's. I mean, he seems like he's got the whole package. It seems like he both has really
Yeah.
solid acting skills and inhabits a character really well and can wrestle well and knows how to make the other guy look good and do cool, impressive things on his own. And I'd be down to watch some of that.
Yeah, all of that. Edge was fantastic.
We had a nice little conversation there about the role of competition in wrestling.
Mhm.
You're asking, how could they be competitive if it's not really, a sport where they're trying to beat each other? And we talked about it sort of being similar to actors competing for roles and things like that.
Theater drama.
Yeah, competing for spaces on the card. And I was actually thinking the competition can kind of be much worse in those situations because there's no clear objective measure of who's better. So there can be a lot more argument about who should be in the spots as opposed to sports where you just score more points or whatever. And to me, that's a lot like how it is in academia. So as compared to the private sector where there's sort of the bottom line of whether you're making money or not. So if everyone has beef over whatever, you can still, get around the fact, well, we want to make money. In academia, because the financial aspect of it is sort of taken out of the equation to some degree, people can be territorial and competitive about the pettiest fucking shit. And I think you get that in wrestling as well.
Oh, yeah.
I would imagine it also has a structure that is similar to either a toxic family structure or a cult-like situation where how well you are doing really is a reflection of what management thinks of you.
Oh,
Or
yes,
what
very much so.
what either one person thinks of you or what a small group of people think of you, but really probably what one person who is charismatic enough to be a person who started a wrestling promotion thinks and has a bunch of people who are probably a little younger than them and look up to them, like really, really thirsty for their approval, and their approval is very decisive. Like, oh, do you have my approval? You get a fucking belt and you get to win in front of these people.
Yeah, and reputation is everything.
Yeah.
Vince McMahon famously, he famously hates, at least on his inner circle of writers, he hates yes men. You know, he wants you to. He wants you to like his ideas, but if he whiffs you if he gets a whiff of you trying to bullshit him if he catches a whiff of you trying to bullshit him in that direction, apparently he will lose all of his respect for you. That being said, a lot of performers have said that they're performing to an audience of one, and that one is Vince, because if he thinks you're the best, he's going to put you on top, and you're going to make the most money.
The sad thing about that kind of petty competitiveness is in both academia as well as wrestling, collaboration and working together really is the way to put on the best show and come out with the best product. And I think that's probably lost on a lot of people.
Where wrestling is a real competition and where it is a show, I mean, it's kind of blurry, right? And even though
sometimes.
And even though it's, arguably much more of a show than it is a competition, like, it's still athletic enough and still filled with enough people who are interested in attention and also working hard to, improve themselves physically and move their career along and stuff, where all of that is going to be mixed in there. And I imagine there's no way that you could ever have maybe this is pessimistic, but it seems like it would be incredibly difficult to have a truly cooperative wrestling promotion.
And that's why there's no union.
Yeah, shit, that's got to be it.
Reasons.
A long-term fantastical goal that I would like to have for this podcast is to be instrumental in helping wrestlers unionize, because
there are a lot of people that want it, but more than a lot of people have to want it. A vast majority of the workers in wrestling, including the people at the top, have to want it and be willing to work towards it. And until that happens, it's not going to happen. So if we could influence it in a little way, that'd be great.
Couple other things. We mentioned TNA's parent company, Panda Energy, their former parent company, Panda Energy. Doc right now is wearing a T-shirt that I actually have one of as well myself. It's a pretty funny thing. It's two pandas. One of them's about to hit the other one over the head with a chair, and it says WWF.
Yeah.
And this is a joke on the fact that the WWE became the WWE because they had some kind of conflict with the World Wildlife Fund, the other WWF, which the World Wildlife Fund kind of won. And part of me, this is another one of my wrestling conspiracy theories, but when I first heard of Panda Energy, I'm like, is that secretly a WWE shell company? Referencing that controversy. So anyway, I thought I'd put that out there.
It's a shame that the truth was that it was just an energy company that was hooking pandas up to batteries and draining them of their natural life force. Much darker. Yeah.
And Samoa Joe.
They
also had him hooked up and was draining his life force. That's why he sucked so much when he was in TNA.
Especially that second half of Joe. And all his interviews, he was just like, they're paying me real well. And it's like, all right. They're paying me real well, and I have limited dates, so I got a lot of time off. And I'm like, all right, Joe, it's okay.
That's not great when you're giving interviews where you're just justifying to yourself why you're still here. It's like, look, I don't know what you want. I got a family.
He does. Eventually, the WWE finally relented and signed him. Apparently, Vince McMahon didn't like his look and all of that. And, of course, as soon as they put him on television, he got over. Samoa Joe's great. But
though they still make him lose all the fucking time.
Yeah, they still make him lose all the time.
Even though he had, probably the best match that Brock Lesnar has had, except for maybe the Daniel Bryan match.
Yeah.
Since, this last time that he came, I don't know, in the last 5 years or something.
Yeah, well, Joe can have a good match with anybody. In TNA for a while there, he stopped because it didn't matter.
We mentioned in the episode a scramble cage, a Ring of Honor scramble cage match that we discussed. That will be coming up in a future episode. Just so you know.
We've recorded a lot of episodes. They're not being put out in the order that we recorded them. So fair warning, some of this will be a little inconsistent. And since we don't have a running narrative, it doesn't matter. So just enjoy them, please.
I will say the next episode coming up that's going to come out on Monday is going to be the first time, at least on the podcast, where I really enjoy a match. I did like Undertaker Edge. Don't get me wrong. I did have a good time watching Undertaker Edge.
Oh, so wait, we have butts coming up?
Yes, I wasn't going to...
Oh, okay.
I wasn't going to announce
that.
it. Yeah.
But that Scramble Cage match is on this upcoming episode on Monday as our bad match.
Yes, it is.
So
yeah.
maybe we can say that.
You can bleep out the name of the match in what should become the traditional method, as illustrated in the previous episode.
Oh
yes,
yeah. That will become the bleeping. The bleeping
However you want to edit that is fine. But there's one more thing.
Yes.
If there weren't enough horrible things we had to say about Steve Mongo McMichael,
oh God,
we actually glossed over, or we didn't mention the really most horrible, egregious thing that happens. The only thing that he seems really excited about during that match, besides the little football tackle scene he does, is WWE Hall of Famer Jacqueline is in the corner of one of the teams for this match. I think Beer Money.
Yeah, she was with Beer Money for a while. What were they calling her in TNA again?
Miss Jackie?
I'm not even sure.
Did you rewatch the match for this?
No, I listened to the episode and I don't know. I remembered that we didn't say this. I don't know.
No, I know.
My brain has become this weird feedback loop where I'm just thinking about the thing that I said about the thing that I said.
You are
it's starting
now
to drive
a
me crazy.
broadcaster.
And I just want you to know, I was not asking that in a judgmental way. I just wanted to be like,
I would not have watched that match again. No fucking way.
I would never ask you to do that. No, I don't think Doc or I would ever hold you to that kind of a standard for this podcast.
Once is one too many.
Anyway, Jacqueline gets in the ring and fucking Mongo rides her like a fucking horse and spanks her with absolute glee. And it's just god awful.
Oh, God.
I felt like we had to mention it just because it's
we should.
That shit.
We got to talk about how wrestling needs to improve.
TNA needed to improve on a variety of levels. They have finally stopped calling themselves TNA, but they'll always be TNA.
Any other pressing issues? Fan feedback, fan reactions? I will say this, fan feedback, we are going to... It'll take a little while for this to catch up on the main feed, but in terms of at least our premium episodes and the show notes and stuff like that, we're going to try to start putting more specific timestamps, give you a little more info on where you can find the matches we're watching.
We want this to be very accessible to people who don't already know what we're talking about.
And so right now we're doing a lot of WWE stuff because the guys are kind of trying to give me as much of a historical basis for wrestling as possible. But we are going to try to do a lot more stuff that you can just find on the internet or find on YouTube.
Yeah, and I won't give it all away, but starting this Monday, we will be having some non-WWE content.
Yes, yeah. It's going to be very exciting.
We're very happy about that.
Alrighty, cool. So this has been mini episode number 2. Thank you very much. Follow us on Twitter at ContestingW. Support us on Patreon, patreon.com/contestingwrestling. We will see you on Monday for the main episode. Thank you.